This is your dose of daily market wisdom with master trader Nick Santiago. Starting from humble beginnings, Nick has been beating the markets for over 2 decades. He shares with you his take on the profitable trades that will have you moving towards financial freedom in no time at all. To see an in-depth review of his track record and much more, go to inthemoneystocks.com. Welcome. This is your daily dose of daily market wisdom with master trader Nick Santiago. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. It's 8:30:23, show 520. So, Nick, the major stock indexes are bouncing back today.
Yeah, they are bouncing back. In fact, yesterday we had a very big rally and the markets held up. This is the final trading week in the month of August, as you know, and the final period ahead of the Labor Day holiday. So often the markets will have light volume, and with the light volume in play, they can gradually float a bit higher into the end of the week, I would expect. So most often holidays will favor upside, but, you know, Kerry, these days we can't take it for granted. We have seen a fair amount of periods where the markets have gone down during a holiday or right before it. So let's not take it for granted, but it does look like the markets are poised to go higher this week, and so far that has been the case.
Yeah, and surprising because the economic data has been weak.
Yeah, and I believe that's helping the market. So while the economic data has been soft this week, yesterday you had a week's JOLT report, and that's job openings, and that really helped the market out because yields pulled back, and the market loves that. The market saw the dollar pull back, so the market's thinking, wow, if the economic data is weak, the Fed will hold rates or even perhaps cut rates. While that could be true, we're looking at, you know, bad news now turning into good news. And even today we had the GDP, the second estimate for second quarter GDP growth was marked down to 2.1% versus the estimate of 2.4. So again, we're seeing weaker economic data being in play here, and that ultimately is pulling yields down a little bit and giving the markets a little bit of a facelift here. So you know, I think everybody should be a little bit careful because right now bad news is good news, but at some point, bad news will be bad news once again.
Yeah. Well, so yields have also backed down a little bit this week as well.
Yeah, yields have come in quite a bit. In fact, if you look at the 10-year Treasury note yield, we're sitting right now down about 2 basis points at around 4.1%. Earlier, or about a week ago, I should say, yields were trading at around 4.36%. So they have backed off. And the all-important 2-year Treasury note yield, which is around 4.85, 4.86% this morning, just, you know, a week ago was above 5%. So we have seen yields come back in, and the market right now is kind of rejoicing over that, at least for the moment. But if keep an eye on that 2-year, Kerry, we've talked about that pretty much before anybody. If that starts to creep back above 5%, it will certainly spook markets once again, as it will put the Fed behind the curve. Remember, the Fed funds rate right now is at around 5.25% to 5.5%. The 2-year, if that gets above the Fed funds rate or even near it, I don't think the market's going to be happy because it'll just tell us that the Fed has to raise rates again.
But for the present time, it gives the Fed a little breathing room, doesn't it?
It does. It gives the Fed a little breathing room. They could, at the next meeting, perhaps pause. They don't have to do anything. But, you know, these yields move quickly. So one day they could be below, and one day they could surge. So, you know, we have to watch them each and every day, and we'll see how this all plays out. But, yeah, as long as it stays below that 5.25% level, the Fed does have some wiggle room here.
Okay. Hey, so gold and silver kind of flat. They were up a bit more beginning of the day. They're kind of flat.
Yeah, they've stabilized a little bit, really just going sideways here now, but they're still up 0.4%. So all in all, gold has had a good little bounce as of late. You know, just gold formed about a 4-day chart base just recently, and it popped yesterday. So gold's acting fairly well right now, and I do think there could be a little bit more upside. Gold futures, though, are certainly hitting some resistance at this 1975 area. So, you know, it may need to base again before trying to push higher, but it certainly has caught a nice little bid over the past week or so. The dollar pulling back again today is certainly helping gold, and the dollar backed off yesterday in a big way. So dollar down, gold up. That seems to be the theme at this point in time.
Right. So yesterday, this is an interesting story here. Bitcoin surged after a positive court ruling for Grayscale Bitcoin ETF. What was that about?
Yeah, so there was a court ruling yesterday that basically put Grayscale, GBTC is the ticker symbol there, but it puts them in a closer position, potentially getting their own Bitcoin ETF. Now, a lot of people think it'll be the first spot ETF. Right now, we do have Bitcoin futures ETFs, and you have some others, but this one now is closer to becoming a spot ETF, and the market just really rejoiced over it. I mean, Bitcoin surged, all of the crypto type stocks like Coinbase surged. So it was a big day yesterday, but I just want to remind everybody, today Bitcoin is down 2%. So you want to be a little bit careful there. That could turn into a bullish base, maybe to go higher. But last week, Bitcoin failed at what we call a bullish pullback pattern on a weekly basis. And I think that pattern broke, and best moves will usually come from failed moves. So just remember, it did break on the weekly. You want to be very careful. Another thing I want to say also is that the commercial money, they went heavily short Bitcoin last week. I don't know what they're going to say about it this week, but when the commercial money does something, I'm always paying attention to it.
All right. Hey, so we got a couple of questions out there from our community. Number one is from Joseph. He says, Nick, Kerry, what is the significance of BRICS, the fact that they're expanding it, and is it a near-term threat to the dollar?
I don't think it's a near-term threat to the dollar. It's definitely something that you're going to have to watch going forward, and definitely could be a threat to the dollar in 2, 3, 4 years. I just don't think they can get that up and running and organized enough at this point in time. So eventually, I do think the dollar is going to be going by the wayside, meaning it's no longer going to be the world's reserve currency. I think the writing is on the wall. But I still think that's 2 to 4 years away. I don't think that's going to happen right away. People are just not going to jump on board and say, hey, the BRICS is here, and South Africa is really stable. I want to be part of that. They're going to try to back it by gold, is from what I understand. But that will take a while to get that organized. But should they do it, yeah, it will take over. And I do think it could be a threat, but I just don't think it's happening immediately.
Well, like these countries are the worst performing countries in the past decade. China is on the brink of a major collapse right now. The CCP could conceivably become a thing of the past shortly if the trends continue the way they are. But more importantly, the yuan has been extremely weak. And if you're going to have this trading currency between this group backed by gold, and yet their own individual currencies won't be backed by gold, how is that going to help? I think that the Chinese are desperate because they're going to have to come up with a new currency if things continue the way they are in China.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, you can make a case for every one of those countries are problematic, but a lot of times what those countries will say is that the United States weaponizes the dollar. So, if they can get organized and they can actually make a gold-backed currency, that would probably be something that could be a threat. But like I said, right now, I don't think that could even get launched off the ground, because a lot of these countries, whether it's Brazil or China or even to a fair, look at South Africa. That place is a mess right now. Yeah. So, they're not going to be able to pull this off right away. But hey, all great ideas start with a plan, right? And then you have to implement it. So that's going to be tough to implement. I don't see it as being a threat to the dollar. But in 2 to 4 years, hey, if these guys back it by gold, that will force the United States to back their currency by gold, unless we're all digital at that point in time, and then we'll have, gold and silver become the currency of choice in the underground world, right? Or,
right.
That'll be the shadow economy, so to speak. At least that's my take on it. I think people are not going to, just live by central bank digital currencies and do what they say. So, it's going to be interesting.
And the Chinese century, which we all thought was coming, appears to have been put off indefinitely into the future. Nobody trusts them, even less than they trust the West and the U.S. financial system. And the degree of transparency that would be required to pull this off, I just don't see countries like Russia, China, Saudi Arabia being at the forefront of that degree of transparency. I mean, I think it's inevitable that, like we talked about many times before, that we go back to a monetary metal-backed system. But I'm not sure that they're the ones to do it, even though they do, by all accounts, possess a lot of gold reserves.
Yeah, they do, and that's their hope. I mean, that's the only way I could see it becoming even viable. They have to go, completely backed by gold and silver. If they don't do it, this thing will just be another idea that falls by the wayside. But if they can put it together, yeah, it'll certainly be a threat, or it will push the U.S. to become backed by gold and silver once again. In my opinion, Kerry, the only way society is going to survive in the long run is to be backed by a precious metal, because you have to have something where central banks just cannot go out there and create money out of thin air. I know some people love the elastic economy. They think that's the greatest thing, but it's great. But what happens is that you have governments that completely abuse it. U.S. debt is now nearing $33 trillion. That's a number, I think it takes 35 years or 31,000 years, to count to a trillion in seconds. So just think about it. We can't even imagine what $33 trillion in debt is, especially when it's leveraged. So, you're going to have to go back to some kind of gold-backed currency at some point in time anyway.
But my point also is you won't be able to have a trading currency that's backed by gold if you don't have currencies, national currencies backed by gold at the same time, because then it'll be the value of the trading currency will be increasing and the value of the national currencies will be decreasing, and that will kind of defeat the purpose of the whole thing,
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. That's why I say this cannot happen right away. This will take a while. I mean, I would probably put it down as a minimum of 2 to 4 years, a minimum, and that's really just to get some kind of a floor base out in the system. So it would take a while. That's why people say short the dollar. No, the dollar's still going to be viable for the next 2 to 4 years easily. I just don't see that happening. Yeah.
No choice. Hey, and the other thing is, if one of the countries was to back their currency by gold, like let's say Saudi Arabia, and the others didn't, that would create instability. So they all have to back their national currencies by gold, or none of them do. And if they don't, then it's just the same thing as we have now, just with a different flavor,
It is. You're 100% right. And that's going to be the $1 million question. How do they roll this out, and do they realize that? So, it'll be interesting, because at least the conversation is getting started here. Hey, that, currencies need to be backed by gold and silver. I know maybe it may not happen here in the U.S., because I know there's talk of, just killing gold and silver, right? Making them become worthless. So that would be the chatter to get the central bank digital currency in. But, then you're just going to get people that are just going to deal with gold and silver to each other. And, you'll get, a shadow economy with gold and silver anyway. So this is going to be really interesting as we roll this, as this all gets rolled out over the next year or so. But central bank digital currency is definitely going to be pushed upon us at some point here.
All right. Hey, and, I would just say that it's a funny thing. I interviewed David Stockman one time. He was Reagan's budget director, young guy at the time. And I asked him what their biggest failing was in the Reagan years. And he said, not instituting sound money.
Well, that's funny. He said that because he actually says a lot of truths. But he would probably be the only one that says that, right? These politicians.
Yeah, the only.
Yeah, these politicians, for the most part, they love the ability to just borrow at will with the unlimited credit card. You couldn't run your house like the governments run, the government. It's just a
Yeah.
complete joke, and it's an unlimited credit card bill. I mean, these guys can just print money at will, and it's getting to the point where at some stage it's going to backfire. And I think we're getting closer to that, Kerry, as we get towards 2030, 2031,
Exactly.
32. I think it's happening.
All right. Question, nat gas. Somebody has a losing position. I guess it's even more losing. Hasn't been performing as well as we hoped.
Well, nat gas has been very choppy, as you know, but it's making higher lows on the chart. If you just look at nat gas futures and you use a continuous contract, because sometimes, depending on what contract you have, it could be more volatile or less volatile. But if you look at nat gas, it really bottomed out in March. And since then, it's been making higher lows. So, it hasn't broken out. If that's what they're talking about, it hasn't gotten over the 305 threshold. But once it does that, you'll get a squeeze and it'll go a lot higher. So, this is a trade you got to be patient with if you're in the nat gas. But I believe nat gas has bottomed, and I think it's setting up to go a lot higher.
All right. Well, that is it for today. We will be back on Friday. Make sure you go to Nick's site, inthemoneystocks.com. See how he's beaten the averages for decades. And while you're at it, check out the Twitter feeds at ITMS, at Nick Santiago01, at Kerry Lutz. Emails are welcome, kl@kerrylutz.com. Write your comments below. Nick, we will talk to you on Friday.
Sounds good, Kerry.